The message came at midnight, broadcast across every channel in known space. Every television, every radio, every communication device on Earth suddenly showed the same image. A tall figure with gray skin and 4 arms stood before a golden throne. His eyes were black as deep space, and his voice carried the weight of absolute power. "People of Earth," High Sovereign Velthar said, "the Zorvaxian Galactic Empire has watched your species spread across the stars like a disease. You have claimed systems that belong to us. You have refused to bow before the natural order of the galaxy. For these crimes, we declare war upon your kind. You have 30 standard days to surrender unconditionally, or we will reduce your worlds to ash." The transmission ended. Silence followed. In Geneva, the United Nations Emergency Council gathered within the hour. World leaders appeared on screens from every continent, their faces showing the same expression of terror. Military commanders shared what they knew, and the numbers were devastating. The Zorvaxian Empire controlled over 12,000 star systems. Their fleet numbered in the millions of warships. They had conquered over 40 species in their long history and had never lost a war. Humanity, by comparison, had colonized just 18 worlds and possessed fewer than 3,000 military vessels. "We cannot win this fight," said the American president. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. "We need to consider their terms." "Surrender means slavery," replied the Chinese premier. "We have all seen what happens to species the Zorvaxians conquer. They become servants, nothing more." Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some called for immediate capitulation. Others demanded a desperate military defense. A few suggested fleeing to the outer reaches of the galaxy and hiding. Through all of this, one man sat quietly in the corner of the room. Daniel Carter was 62 years old. With gray hair and calm brown eyes, he had served as humanity's senior envoy to the galactic community for 15 years. He had met with species from across the stars, negotiated trade deals, and built relationships that most humans never knew existed. He had also been preparing for this exact moment. When the arguments grew loud enough to shake the walls, Daniel stood and cleared his throat. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone respected the man who had navigated galactic politics longer than anyone else alive. "I would like to respond to High Sovereign Velthar personally," Daniel said. The Secretary General frowned. "Respond? What could you possibly say that would matter? Something that might change everything." Daniel replied, "I have spent 15 years studying the Zorvaxians. I know things about them that they do not want anyone to know. I believe I can end this war before it begins." Laughter came from several screens. The British Prime Minister shook her head. "One man cannot stop an empire of millions of ships." "With respect," Daniel said, "I am not asking to stop them with force. I am asking for permission to outsmart them." The council debated for another hour. They had no better options. Finally, they agreed to let Daniel send his response. Daniel returned to his office and sat before the camera. His assistant, a young woman named Laura Bennett, watched from behind the equipment. She had worked with Daniel for 5 years and had helped him gather intelligence from across the galaxy. She knew parts of his plan, but not all of it. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "I have been sure about this for a very long time." He pressed the button to begin recording. "High Sovereign Velthar," Daniel began. "I am Daniel Carter, Senior Envoy of the human race. I have received your declaration of war, and I must say, I am both honored and amused." He paused and let out a small laugh. It was not nervous or fearful. It was the laugh of someone who knew a secret. "You command an impressive empire. 12,000 systems, millions of ships, a history of conquest stretching back 10,000 years. By all measures, humanity should be terrified, and yet I find myself laughing. Do you know why?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Because I know what you are hiding. I know the truth about how your empire was built. And I know that if that truth were ever revealed, your entire civilization would collapse within a year." He let those words hang in the air. I am not threatening you. I am simply asking for a meeting. According to Article 7 of the Galactic Convention on Armed Conflict, any species may request a formal diplomatic session before hostilities begin. I am invoking that right. I want to meet with you face to face, in a neutral location, with witnesses from across the galaxy. We will discuss terms, and then we will see whether this war is truly necessary. Daniel smiled again. I suspect you will agree to this meeting. After all, refusing would make you look weak. And we both know that weakness is something your empire cannot afford to show. He ended the recording and sent it across every channel that would carry it. Laura stared at him with wide eyes. You just insulted the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. I did, Daniel agreed. And now we wait. The response came within 6 hours. High Sovereign Velthar appeared on screen again. His 4 arms crossed over his chest. His black eyes burned with anger. But his voice remained controlled. Human envoy, Velthar said. Your arrogance is remarkable for a species so young and so weak. But I will grant your request. We will meet at Station Orion, in the neutral zone, in 10 standard days. Bring whatever secrets you think you possess. I will enjoy watching you realize how meaningless they are before I destroy your worlds. The transmission ended. Daniel turned to Laura with a genuine smile on his face. That went exactly as planned, he said. Now the real work begins. Laura shook her head slowly. You are either the bravest man alive or completely insane. Daniel considered this for a moment. Probably both, he admitted. But I have been preparing for this war for 15 years. The Zorvaxians think they are about to crush a helpless species. They have no idea that humanity has been waiting for them to make exactly this mistake. He stood and walked toward the door. Contact Kevin Price. Tell him it is time, and prepare the ship. We leave for Station Orion tomorrow. Laura watched him go, wondering what secrets he carried, and whether they were truly enough to stop an empire. She would find out soon enough. The diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge was not a warship. It carried no heavy weapons and had minimal armor. From the outside, it looked like exactly what it was supposed to be. A small transport for politicians and ambassadors who preferred talking to fighting. But looks could be deceiving. Daniel Carter stood in the main briefing room as his small team gathered around the central table. There were only 5 of them on this mission. 5 humans against an empire of billions. The odds seemed impossible, but Daniel had learned long ago that numbers rarely decided the outcome of true conflicts. Laura Bennett was the first to speak. She had spent the last 3 days gathering every piece of intelligence she could find about the Zorvaxian Empire. Her reports filled multiple screens around the room. The Empire looks strong from the outside, she said. But it has serious problems underneath the surface. The Zorvaxians rule over 43 different species, and most of them hate their masters. They are kept in line through fear and military force, not loyalty. She pulled up a map showing the Empire's territory. Thousands of star systems glowed in red, but within that red were clusters of different colors representing the various subject species. The Korathi control most of the Empire's shipbuilding. The Meldrani produce 80% of their food. The Fenari handle their medical supplies. And the Villani? Laura paused, her expression serious. The Villani are the key to everything. Daniel nodded. He had known about the Villani for years. They were a quiet species, rarely seen in public, kept hidden on a handful of worlds deep within the Empire's core territories. Tell them what we discovered, Daniel said. Laura took a deep breath. The Zorvaxians did not build their empire. They stole it. 7,000 years ago, they were a primitive species barely capable of reaching their own moon. Then they encountered the Villani, a peaceful civilization of engineers and scientists who had developed technology far beyond anything else in the galaxy. She changed the display to show ancient records that had taken years to find and translate. The Zorvaxians conquered the Villani through simple brutality. They killed millions, enslaved the rest, and claimed all their technology as their own. Every ship in the Imperial fleet, every weapon, every piece of advanced equipment was designed by Villani engineers. The Zorvaxians cannot even maintain their own systems without Villani help. Kevin Price leaned forward. He was a thin man with nervous eyes, but his mind worked faster than anyone Daniel had ever met. He specialized in communication systems and had spent the last decade doing something that no one in the Empire suspected. "That is where I come in," Kevin said. "For the past 12 years, during every diplomatic exchange, every trade negotiation, every routine communication between humanity and other species, I have been planting programs in the Empire's networks. Small pieces of code that sit dormant, invisible, waiting." He brought up a diagram showing the Empire's communication infrastructure. "I can access their military command channels. I can disrupt their coordination systems. I can broadcast any message to any world in their territory. They have no idea these programs exist." The third team member, a woman named Carol Fields, spoke up. She handled logistics and had coordinated the most secret part of Daniel's plan. "We have also been making friends," she said. "For the past 8 years, we have been contacting resistance movements among the subject species. The Korathi, the Meldrani, the Fenari, and 6 others. We promised them recognition, trade agreements, and military protection if they ever had the chance to break free." She smiled grimly. "They have been waiting for that chance. All they needed was someone to show them the moment had arrived." Daniel looked around the room at his team. 5 people carrying the hopes of humanity on their shoulders. "Here is what we are going to do," he said. "We are not going to fight the Zorvaxians. We are going to make it impossible for them to fight us." He pulled up his own presentation, showing the Empire as a complex web of connections and dependencies. "The Zorvaxians think their empire is held together by military power. They are wrong. It is held together by the labor of species they have enslaved and the technology they stole. Take those away, and the empire collapses on itself." Daniel pointed to key locations on the map. "At the meeting on Station Orion, I will reveal the truth about the Villani to the entire galaxy. Kevin will broadcast the evidence to every subject species in the Empire simultaneously. At that exact moment, our allies among those species will begin their work. The Korathi will shut down the shipyards. The Meldrani will stop food exports. The Villani will lock the Zorvaxians out of their own defense systems." Laura raised an eyebrow. "And if Velthar simply kills you and attacks Earth anyway?" Daniel's smile did not waver. "Carol, tell them about the insurance policy." Carol nodded. 6 months ago, we positioned 3 stealth vessels near the Zorvaxian homeworld. They carry enough nuclear weapons to destroy every major city on their planet. If they attack Earth, we strike back." The room fell silent. Kevin looked uncomfortable with this revelation, but he said nothing. "I do not want to use those weapons," Daniel said quietly. "I do not want anyone to die. That is why we are doing this. We are not going to win this war by killing Zorvaxians. We are going to win by showing them that war itself is pointless." He stood straight and looked at each team member in turn. "The Empire has always believed that power comes from conquest and fear. We are going to teach them a different lesson. Power comes from cooperation, from building alliances, from understanding your enemies better than they understand themselves." The ship shuddered slightly as it jumped to faster-than-light travel. They would reach Station Orion in 8 days. Laura studied the data on her screen. "This plan has 1,000 ways to fail." "It does," Daniel agreed. "But it also has one way to succeed, and that is all we need." Kevin cracked his knuckles nervously. "No pressure, right?" Daniel laughed, and for a moment, the tension in the room eased. "The Zorvaxians have never faced an enemy like humanity," he said. "They have conquered species with bigger fleets and more resources. But they have never faced a species that refuses to play by their rules. We are not going to meet them on the battlefield. We are going to change the battlefield entirely." He turned toward the window, watching the stars streak past as they traveled toward their destination. "In 10 days, the galaxy will learn what happens when you underestimate humanity. They will learn that we are not just survivors. We are something far more dangerous." Laura joined him at the window. "What is that?" Daniel's eyes reflected the distant stars. "We are the species that always finds another way." Station Orion floated in the empty space between star systems. A massive structure built centuries ago, As neutral ground for galactic diplomacy, its halls had witnessed treaties that ended wars and declarations that started them. Today, it would witness something that no one expected. The main chamber was vast, designed to hold representatives from dozens of species. Tiered seating rose in circles around a central platform where the main parties would stand. When Daniel Carter arrived, the chamber was already filling with ambassadors, journalists, and observers from across the galaxy. He walked slowly toward the platform, wearing simple gray clothes with no decorations or symbols of rank. Laura Bennett and Kevin Price followed behind him. 3 humans against the might of an empire. The Zorvaxian delegation had arrived first. High Sovereign Velthar sat on a raised throne that his servants had brought from his flagship. His forearms rested on golden armrests, and his black eyes tracked Daniel's every step. Behind him stood 50 Imperial guards in full battle armor. Their weapons visible and ready. The message was clear. The Empire did not come to negotiate. It came to dominate. Daniel stepped onto the platform and gave a small bow, just polite enough to satisfy protocol. "High Sovereign Velthar," he said, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Velthar did not return the bow. His voice echoed through the chamber, with the weight of absolute authority. "I did not come here to talk, human. I came here to watch you beg. Your species has been an annoyance in this galaxy for too long. Today, you will accept complete surrender, or you will watch your worlds burn." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Many species had suffered under Zorvaxian rule. They watched with a mixture of fear and dark curiosity. Daniel remained calm. "If you had no interest in talking, you would not have come. You would have simply attacked. But you did come, which means some part of you wants to know what I know." Velthar's eyes narrowed. "You claim to possess secrets about my empire. I wanted to see your face when you realized those secrets were meaningless." "Then let us find out," Daniel said. He turned to address the entire chamber, his voice carrying to every corner. "Distinguished representatives of the galactic community, I thank you for witnessing this moment. What I am about to reveal will change your understanding of the Zorvaxian Empire forever." Kevin Price activated his equipment. Every screen in the chamber flickered and changed to show the same image. Ancient records written in a language few recognized. These documents were hidden in archives across the Empire for 7,000 years, Daniel explained. They tell the true story of how the Zorvaxians rose to power. He paused, letting the tension build. 7,000 years ago, the Zorvaxians were a primitive species. They had barely achieved space travel. They were considered irrelevant by more advanced civilizations. Then they encountered the Villani. The screens showed images of a gentle species with elongated limbs and large, intelligent eyes. The Villani were engineers without equal. They built technology that other species could barely understand. They were peaceful, curious, and generous. When the Zorvaxians came to them, the Villani welcomed them as friends. Daniel's voice grew harder. The Zorvaxians repaid that friendship with genocide. They killed billions of Villani. They enslaved the survivors. They stole every piece of technology the Villani had created and claimed it as their own. The great empire that rules this galaxy was not built by the Zorvaxians. It was stolen from a species they nearly destroyed. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted questions. Journalists struggled to record everything. The representatives of subject species stared at the screens with expressions of shock and growing anger. Velthar rose from his throne, his forearms spread wide. "Lies!" he roared. "This human speaks lies to divide us." Daniel turned to face him directly. "Then explain why the Villani still exist. Explain why they are kept hidden on restricted worlds. Explain why every piece of advanced technology in your empire requires Villani engineers to maintain." He gestured, and the screens showed new images. The Villani in their current state, working in hidden facilities, guarded constantly, their movements controlled. The Villani are not citizens of your empire. They are prisoners, slaves, and without them, your ships would stop flying, your weapons would stop working, and your entire civilization would collapse. Kevin pressed another button. The broadcast was no longer limited to the chamber. His dormant programs activated across the Empire, sending this message to every subject, species on every world. Billions of beings who had served the Zorvaxians for generations were now seeing the truth. Admiral Kethnar, who commanded the Imperial fleet in orbit, contacted the chamber directly. His face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression troubled. High Sovereign, we are receiving reports from across the Empire. The broadcast is spreading everywhere. We cannot stop it. Velthar's face contorted with rage. He turned toward Daniel with murder in his eyes. You will die for this, he said. You and every human in existence. Daniel did not flinch. Perhaps, but killing me will not bury this truth. It is already spreading. Every species under your rule is learning what you really are. Not conquerors, but thieves. Not builders, but parasites. He stepped closer to Velthar, close enough that the Imperial guards tensed and raised their weapons. Here is something else you should know. We did not just reveal your secrets. We offered something to your subject species. Something you never could. What? Velthar demanded. Hope. Daniel said simply. We promised them that if they stand against you, humanity will stand with them. Recognition, trade, protection. Everything you denied them, we offered freely. Velthar's communicator buzzed. Then again, then continuously. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. The Korathi shipyards had gone silent. The Meldrani agricultural worlds had stopped exports. The Fenari medical facilities were refusing imperial orders. And the Villani engineers had done something unprecedented. They had used their access to imperial systems to lock out the Zorvaxians from their own defense networks. Daniel watched Velthar's expression shift from rage to confusion to something approaching fear. Your empire is not falling because we attacked it, Daniel said quietly, so only Velthar could hear. It is falling because you built it on the backs of species who were waiting for this moment. All we did was give them the signal. Velthar gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the metal creaked. This is not over, he said. Daniel shook his head sadly. No, it is not. But what happens next is up to you. You can try to fight and watch your empire tear itself apart, or you can accept that the old ways are finished and help build something new. The chamber had fallen silent. Everyone watched the confrontation between the human envoy and the High Sovereign, knowing that the future of the galaxy hung on what happened next. Daniel stepped back and waited. The choice now belonged to Velthar. High Sovereign Velthar stood frozen for a long moment. The chamber waited in silence as reports continued flooding in from across his empire. Systems that had obeyed without question for thousands of years were suddenly going dark. Species that had bowed to Zorvaxian authority were now standing up and refusing. Then Velthar made his decision. Guards, he shouted, arrest the human delegation. They will answer for this act of war. The Imperial guards moved forward, weapons raised. Daniel did not step back. Laura and Kevin tensed behind him. But they had been prepared for this possibility. Before you do that, Daniel said calmly, there is something else you should know. He pulled a small device from his pocket and held it up for everyone to see. This device is connected to 3 human vessels that have been positioned near your homeworld for the past 6 months. They are stealth ships, invisible to your sensors. Each one carries enough weapons to destroy every major city on Zorvax Prime. Velthar's face went pale. You are bluffing. Daniel shook his head. We are not. Humanity learned long ago that the best defense is making sure your enemy knows the cost of attacking you. Those ships have orders to launch if anything happens to Earth or to this delegation. He lowered the device. I do not want to use them. I did not come here to threaten destruction. I came here to prevent it. But you need to understand something. High Sovereign. Humanity is not defenseless. We have been preparing for this confrontation since the day we first learned about your empire. Admiral Kethnar's face appeared on the screen again. His expression had changed from troubled to deeply worried. High Sovereign, we have confirmed the presence of 3 unknown vessels near Zorvax Prime. Our sensors missed them completely until they deliberately revealed themselves moments ago. We cannot intercept them in time if they launch." The guards hesitated, looking to Velthar for guidance. For the first time in his long reign, the High Sovereign seemed uncertain. Daniel pressed his advantage. "Let me be clear about your situation," he said. 40% of your fleet is now crewed by species who have stopped following your orders. Your shipyards are not building new vessels. Your food supplies are being cut off. Your engineers have locked you out of your own defense systems. And if you try to destroy Earth, your homeworld dies with it." He spread his hands, showing that he carried no weapons. War with humanity is no longer possible. The question now is what happens next. Velthar's 4 hands clenched into fists. His pride demanded that he fight, that he crush this arrogant species that dared to challenge him. But his intelligence told him that Daniel was right. The war was already lost before it had begun. "What do you want?" Velthar asked through gritted teeth. "Peace," Daniel said simply. "A real peace, not the slavery you offer to conquered species. I want a galaxy where all species are treated as equals, where trade and cooperation replace conquest and fear." He walked slowly toward Velthar, ignoring the guards who still held their weapons ready. "Your empire was built on a lie, on stolen technology and enslaved labor. That foundation is crumbling as we speak. You can try to hold it together with force, but you will fail. Your subject species will never trust you again. They will never stop fighting. Civil war will consume everything you have built." Daniel stopped in front of the throne and looked up at the High Sovereign. "Or you can accept change. Let the subject species go. Rebuild your civilization on honest foundations. It will be difficult and painful, but your people will survive. Your culture will continue, and in time, you might even earn the respect of the galaxy instead of its fear." Velthar stared down at the human, this small creature from a young species that had somehow outmaneuvered the greatest empire in known history. "You planned this for years," he said quietly. "Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, you were preparing for this moment." 15 years, Daniel confirmed. "We knew this confrontation was coming. We just wanted to make sure that when it arrived, we would be ready." "Why not simply destroy us?" Velthar asked. "You clearly had the capability to cause tremendous damage. Why offer peace?" Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Because destruction is easy. Building something better is hard. Humanity has fought enough wars to know that killing your enemies does not solve problems. It just creates new enemies. We do not want the Zorvaxian people to suffer. We want them to become partners in a better galaxy." The chamber had been listening to every word. Delegates from subject species were watching with expressions of hope that they had never allowed themselves to feel before. This human was not just defeating the Empire. He was offering something none of them had dared to imagine. A Karathi ambassador rose from his seat. "If we declare independence, will humanity truly recognize us? Protect us?" Daniel turned to face him. "Yes. We have already prepared formal recognition documents for any species that chooses freedom. We will establish trade relationships and defensive alliances. You will not stand alone." A Meldrani delegate stood next. "And the Villani? What happens to them?" "The Villani will be freed," Daniel said firmly. "Their technology will remain theirs. Any species that wishes to benefit from it will need to negotiate fair terms with the Villani themselves, not take it by force." More delegates rose, calling out questions, expressing hope, demanding guarantees. The chamber transformed from a site of confrontation to something resembling a founding assembly. Velthar watched it all happening around him, his power slipping away with every passing moment. Admiral Kethnar contacted him privately through a secure channel. "High Sovereign, what are your orders? Do we fight?" Velthar was silent for a long time. He looked at Daniel, at the delegates, at the crumbling structure of everything he had known. "No," he finally said. "We do not fight. Not today." He stood from his throne and raised all 4 arms for attention. The chamber slowly quieted. "I will hear terms," Velthar announced. His voice was heavy, but it carried no anger, only the weight of a ruler facing an impossible situation. If humanity and the rebel species wish to negotiate peace, I will listen. Daniel nodded respectfully. That is all we ask. The guards lowered their weapons. The tension in the chamber began to ease, replaced by something cautious and hopeful. Laura moved closer to Daniel and whispered, I cannot believe that worked. Daniel kept his face neutral, but his hands were shaking slightly. Neither can I, he admitted. But we are not finished yet. The hard part is still ahead. He turned back to the assembled delegates. Let us begin, he said. We have a new galaxy to build. The negotiations lasted for 72 hours, without pause. Delegates argued, demanded, compromised, and argued again. Coffee cups piled up around Daniel Carter as he moved between groups, listening to concerns, suggesting solutions, and slowly building the framework of a new galactic order. When it was finally done, the agreement was signed by 47 different species, including the Zorvaxians. The terms were better than anyone had expected. The Zorvaxian Empire would become the Zorvaxian Republic, controlling only their original core worlds and colonies, where their own people lived. All subject species would gain immediate independence. A new galactic council would be formed with equal representation for every member species, regardless of size or military power. Trade would be conducted fairly, with standardized rules that prevented exploitation, and the Villani would be freed. That was the condition Daniel had insisted on most strongly. The Villani engineers who had been slaves for 7,000 years would be given their own worlds, their own government, and complete control over their technology. Any species wanting access to that technology would need to negotiate as equals. High Sovereign Velthar, now simply Velthar of Zorvax, signed the agreement last. His hand moved slowly, as if the pen weighed more than a starship. When he finished, he looked at Daniel with an expression that mixed respect with something close to hatred. You have destroyed everything my ancestors built, Velthar said. Daniel shook his head. Your ancestors built their civilization on the suffering of others. What we destroyed was already rotten. What comes next can be something better, if you choose to make it so. Velthar said nothing more. He turned and walked out of the chamber, his guards following behind him. The Zorvaxian delegation departed Station Orion within the hour, returning to face a future none of them had anticipated. When they were gone, the celebration began. Delegates from dozens of species crowded around the human team, expressing gratitude in languages Daniel barely understood. The Korathi ambassador grasped his hand with 3 of her own, tears streaming down her face. The Meldrani representative bowed so deeply that his forehead touched the floor. Even species Daniel had never met before approached to thank him for giving them hope. Through it all, Daniel remained humble. He smiled, accepted their thanks, and repeatedly emphasized that this was not just a human victory. It belonged to everyone who had worked toward this moment, often at great personal risk. Finally, when the crowds began to thin, a small group approached Daniel's team. They were Villani, the first of their kind Daniel had ever seen in person. Their large eyes studied him with an intelligence that seemed to see far more than he was comfortable with. The leader of the group spoke in a soft voice that carried surprising weight. You freed us without ever meeting us, she said. Why? Daniel considered his answer carefully. Because it was right, he said simply. No species should be enslaved. No civilization should be built on the labor of people who have no choice. When we learned what had been done to your people, we knew we could not ignore it. The Villani studied him for a long moment. Humans are strange, she finally said. You are young, weak by galactic standards, and yet you accomplished what no other species has done in 7,000 years. You challenged the Empire not with weapons, but with truth and kindness. She reached out and touched Daniel's hand gently. We will remember this. The Villani have long memories, and we remember both those who hurt us and those who helped us. Humanity has earned our friendship, for as long as your species exists. Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest. Thank you. I hope we prove worthy of that friendship. The Villani delegation departed, but their words stayed with Daniel long after they had gone. Laura found him sitting alone by a window, staring out at the stars. She sat beside him without speaking, waiting for him to break the silence. "I was terrified," Daniel finally said. "The entire time, every second, I was certain the plan would fail, that Velthar would simply kill us and attack Earth anyway, that the subject species would not rise up, that Kevin's programs would not work." End quote. Laura nodded. "But you never showed it. I could not afford to. The moment they sensed weakness, everything would have collapsed." He turned to look at her. "Do you know what kept me going?" "What?" "The same thing that has kept humanity going since we first looked up at the stars. The belief that we can always find another way. That no problem is truly impossible. That somewhere, somehow, there is a path through the darkness if we are brave enough to look for it." Laura smiled. "That sounds very human." "It is," Daniel agreed. "And it is our greatest strength. Other species are stronger, older, more technologically advanced. But none of them think the way we do. None of them combine curiosity, stubbornness, and hope in quite the same way." He stood and stretched his tired muscles. "The war is over before it began, but our work is just starting. Building this new council, helping newly freed species establish their governments, preventing old hatreds from sparking new conflicts. It will take decades. Are you ready for that?" Laura asked. Daniel looked out at the stars again, at the vast galaxy that had suddenly become a very different place. "I have spent 15 years preparing for this moment," he said. "I suppose I can spend a few more decades making sure it was not wasted." 2 weeks later, Daniel stood before the United Nations Emergency Council once more. The room was very different from his last visit. World leaders watched him with expressions of wonder and gratitude instead of fear and desperation. "The Galactic Council will hold its first session in 3 months," Daniel reported. "Humanity has been offered a permanent seat with full voting rights. We are no longer a minor species on the edge of known space. We are founding members of a new order." The Secretary General stood and began to applaud. Others joined her, and soon the entire chamber was filled with the sound. Daniel waited for the applause to fade. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "We did not win this victory through strength or violence. We won it through intelligence, patience, and the willingness to see our enemies as potential friends. That must be our approach going forward. We must prove to the galaxy that humanity can be trusted, that we will honor our commitments, and that we genuinely want peace." He paused and looked around the room. "The galaxy is watching us now. What we do in the coming years will define how humanity is remembered for millennia. Let us make sure that memory is one we can be proud of." When the council session ended, Daniel walked outside into the fresh air of Earth. He had not felt sunlight on his face for weeks, and he stood for a long moment, simply enjoying the warmth. Kevin Price joined him, looking more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen him. "So," Kevin said, "what now?" Daniel smiled. "Now, we do the impossible again. We build a galaxy where species that have hated each other for thousands of years learn to work together. We help civilizations that have never known freedom figure out how to govern themselves. We make something that has never existed before." Kevin whistled softly. "Is that all?" "For now," Daniel said with a laugh. "I am sure more challenges will come along eventually." He looked up at the sky, knowing that beyond the blue atmosphere, countless worlds were watching and waiting to see what humanity would do next. "We showed them what humans are capable of," Daniel said quietly. "Now we have to prove it was not a mistake to trust us." Kevin nodded. "I think we can manage that." Daniel smiled again, feeling the weight of the future on his shoulders, but also feeling something he had not felt in 15 years. Hope, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy.